The point is that when people talk about fairness, they just talk about what happens to them. So if I love you and you don't love me, that's unfair. If
Yeah,
I
I love you
worked
too,
hard,
Doogles.
yeah, thank you. See, that's fair. And that's fair.
This podcast contains the arguably witty banter of two friends, Skippy and Doogles, that like to debate about investing. The content is intended to be entertaining and for informational purposes only, not investment advice. You should do your own research and consult a financial professional before using any of the information in this podcast, and especially before investing.
Hey there, my friend.
What's up, Doogles? We're going to hop straight into it today. We talked a while back about if you're naming a company, the key thing is to not pick a stupid name. Any
Doogles
decent
Enterprises.
name works. There is a new naming event going on. That's all the information I can give you. And there's like 10 choices. I'm going to give you these names, and I want you to give me your best guess as to what this is that's being named.
What the company does, or is it a different products?
Well, to be fair, I didn't say company, right?
Okay.
Anything.
All right.
Okay, here are the potential names: Blast, Powder, Frost, Glaciers, Venom, Squall, Outlaws, Ice, Fury, and Swarm.
Some kind of power drink.
The correct answer is Gatorade flavors. But what is actually being named here is a hockey team in Utah.
Wait, hold on. How are there two correct answers?
Because the hockey team in Utah apparently thinks they're Gatorade flavor. All right. So here's what happened. The Phoenix Coyotes have relocated to Utah. These are like their 10 final names. I think they're taking votes at this point.
Wow.
Like Venom, Freeze, Frost. There is a Gatorade Frost, first of all. I imagine there's a Gatorade Blast. Like, I think they just went down. They went to the local supermarket and went down the Gatorade aisle and stole some names.
I mean, that's what it sounds like. Those are very different names. If you want to be Venom, be Venom. Don't be Frost.
Don't be Frost.
Don't be Frost.
This reminds me of a good Gatorade story. So sorry for the interlude. When the family, the Gatorade family sold Gatorade, they put in some crazy clause that they got, I think it's 10 cents for every 32 ounces of product sold.
Yeah.
Which was no big deal until who owns the Gatorade today? It's not, the parent is not Coca-Cola, but it's somebody else because Coca-Cola has Powerade.
Yeah, I can't remember what the,
Anyway, the parent company rebrands this thing and starts selling tons of Gatorade. And that family is still collecting something like 10 cents for every 32 ounces sold. Brilliant way to write a contract.
Oh, speaking of which, there was something I did not bring up the other week before we go on. I had mentioned I want to bring up something about Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I never went back to it. And I guarantee you there are people right now that are just like hunkering for what was he going to talk about. And you just reminded me.
So many people. Yes, so many people.
So many person. Yeah, so many person. So Twins, you know the movie Twins? Back in the 1980s, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito were twins in a movie called Twins. The whole premise is how ridiculous that is because they are exact opposites of human beings. What I learned recently is that, according to Schwarzenegger, this movie was the most lucrative movie for him ever. If you just imagine Schwarzenegger, I'm talking like Terminator 2 up in Chet Chet. I'm talking True Lies up in Chet Chet. I'm talking Conan the Barbarian.
How they wrote the contract.
Yes, exactly. It's how they wrote the contract. So apparently, no one wanted to make Twins because of obvious reasons. So no one wanted to make this movie. And so the way that they constructed it was they said, okay, fine. None of us will take salary compensation straight up from the movie. So pay us $0 to make it. But since you don't believe in it so much, we get X% of box office. And someone was like, sure, like we'll take a flyer.
Yeah.
And the movie made buku. And so it was something like $1 million a day that Schwarzenegger was like making up with this movie. And I just wanted that. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So, all right, brief interlude, and you're welcome for the knowledge, people.
Yeah, there's a lesson there. All right, let's continue the admin stuff before we salute a fallen hero. Here's what's been pitched to me this week, Doogles. Airbnb in Omaha on Berkshire weekend, full of Skippy and Doogles listeners. What are your thoughts about this?
I mean, that is a home of Nerdville right there.
Yeah. Well, no, but here's the thing. The town, we were amazed at how dead it was the night before. Like, I think we need to bring some Vegas to Omaha. I
That's
think
all
we
I know how
could
to
yeah, we could brighten this place up a little bit.
do. I mean, it sounds very appealing. 1 year out, this could be one of those things that when you're a year away, you're like, yeah, let's do this Airbnb. So listeners, if you're into this, you got to keep that enthusiasm for 1 whole year.
That's right.
I'm into it.
So here's what I'm gonna formally do is I'm gonna say, shoot us an email, skippydiggles@gmail.com. If you're into the idea of some, like, a 5 to 10 bedroom house, walking distance from the event, where you'd hear some stock pitches and have a little bit of fun, maybe a lot of fun, because it'd be the Skippy and Doogles house. All right.
Yes.
We will
Skippy
see
Doogles.
if there's the right amount of interest for that. And then I will, at least what I'm promising to do, if we get the right amount of interest, is at least shop for Airbnbs. I'm not promising anything more than that.
Wait, that is a weak pitch. Like, send
All
us
right.
your heart and your thoughts through email, and then I think about it.
No, we'll book something as long
There
as
you
Douglas
go.
promises to fly me first class out there.
There you
Then
go. Okay.
done deal.
Dunzo.
All right. So shoot us an email. I think that could be actually a really unique event. And it could be educational, but also tons of fun. So, and here's the thing, you never know with Buffett. Like, hopefully this was not his last year, but if you have the pilgrimage to Omaha on your bucket list, it's something you probably want to do in 2025 because the future is not guaranteed.
Absolutely right. We learned that last year. R.I.P. Charlie Munger.
Okay, let's continue to talk about RIPs, unfortunately.
Yes.
We lost a guy this week that has a track record that is the envy of, I think, any professional investment manager. And the outpouring of support was immediate and strong. So Jim Simons, who is profiled in a book called The Man Who Solved the Market, because he literally did solve the market.
It's a good mark. It's a good book. Good book.
Absolutely great book.
Hold on. Before you go on, I'm going to share this with our listeners because I've forever been like, is it Simons or Simmons? Is it Simons or Simmons? Forever. So I went onto the Google machine and I typed in how to pronounce Jim Simons. I'm going to play you this right quick. I'm going to play you what I learned. You ready for it?
Yeah.
Jamie Simons. Jammies Simons. Jamie Simons. Jammies Simons.
All right, that's probably enough. So every time you say his name,
I was not ready for that at all. Like,
so I want to hear you pronounce it correctly because if you're gonna come, you gotta come correct.
why someone actually recorded that and posted that on the internet as if they are the expert in pronouncing this name?
Yes, the people needed to hear that. All right, now can you seriously talk about his life at this point? Or?
That is not how he pronounces his name. Just for the record.
Yeah, I don't think so.
No, I'm not going to do a deep dive. I'm going to strongly recommend, although Doogles, if you have stats and stuff, feel free. But I'm going to strongly recommend people read that book. And honestly, my tribute to him is more the fact that for 30 years, from 1998 to 2018, he averaged a return of 66% a year. The best return in my investing career is like 52% or something, right? This dude averaged better than all the greats. The greats in investing typically become a great in investing for a few reasons. You write a book or you get really good publicity and you have returns that are above somewhere between 15 or 30% annually for 15 to 30 years. That's how this works. And then there is Jim Simons, who...
And the thing is, this is one of those cases where we always talk about watch your fees because they take the fees out and your returns go to nonsense. This fund is a 5%, like huge fees. However, after fees average 44%. I mean, it's like fees justified is the answer on that one. It's huge. 66%.
66%. At the end of his tenure here. Well, so first of all, Jim and his fund did things that only people that are geniuses do. First thing they do is they have Amazing performance. Second thing they do is they kick the public out of their fund. They solved this so well when you're averaging 60+% returns that they realized, obviously, the fund gets so big so quickly when you do that, that they realized they were only going to make the employees rich because that was all the capital they could support when it's growing this quickly. And so then on top of that, the fees point is at the end of their tenure, they were charging a 5% fixed fee and a 44% performance fee. And after fees, you're still returning like 40% annualized returns. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah.
The guy's a genius.
Yeah, it's very wild. It's kind of the opposite of what we've talked about before, where the person writes the book about writing the book, right? Like, how do you make 100,000? What was the joke you were telling? How do you make $100,000? Like writing
on
a
Amazon,
book?
you
Yeah,
sell a book on Amazon for $100,000.
yeah, exactly. And so people do one thing, do it mediocrely, and then write a book about how you do that thing. And you kind of know that it's not great because they wrote a book telling you how to do it. This is the exact opposite thing where he goes, this is great. So bye, Felicia.
It's so great. I don't want you, and I don't want to tell anyone about
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
It
exactly.
wasn't until later in his life when his philanthropic efforts that were important that he was like okay with the publicity of it all. Really,
Mhm.
Brilliant guy, absolutely great book. I'll say it again: the envy of everyone on Wall Street. Everyone wishes that they were Jim. Everyone wishes they had Jim's performance. And here's the mind-boggling thing, Douglas. If he would have come to me like 2 years into his investing career, no, like 5 years into his investing career, and been like, "Hey, Skippy, I got a spot for you," it's very likely I would have looked at his returns and considered this as a fraud or something,
Yeah.
and not become a billionaire for free.
Mm-hmm.
He's literally minting billionaires over here. And here's the funny thing: in his track record, in the book, his first two recorded years are actually 1988 and 1989, and the returns there 16% in 88 and 1% in 89. So you could have been your very first friend in the door and been like, this guy's terrible. From that point on, it's like 77%, 55%, 93%, 127%. Like it
Yeah.
did take him a few years to catch his stride.
And off memory, I think 2008, which is when everything crashed, I think it was like 88%, something like that.
2008, 152%.
Yeah, something like 88%.
152%.
It's
The whole
wild.
world is burning around him, and he's making money off it
Yeah.
because his quantitative strategies are so good because he's such a math genius. Amazing.
What you just said is absolutely right. Math genius. If you went to this guy and said, can you tell me how to appropriately invest in any asset? You go, no, I can't. I can't tell you how to look at stocks. I can't tell you about commodities. I can't. All I can tell you is that investing is a long string of numbers, and I can tell you how to look at those numbers such that you can make money. Like that is it. He's a mathematician through and through. He was a code breaker back in the day. Read the book for the history. I won't go into it here in any real detail, but he's someone that did not at all come up through investing. He came up like working for the NSA, code breaking. So it's a very different world that he came through and just landed. And we took him like, I want to say 10 years or so of nearly bankrupting everything to like figure out the algorithms. It's pretty wild. Read that book.
Yeah. Well, it's not easy. Gosh, he's incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible dude. So our salute for sure. One of my favorite things about him is that, gosh, even 10 years ago, I would say like hardly anyone even knew the name. 20 years ago, I think you had to know of him directly through his fund to even know the name, it seemed. Maybe I'm exaggerating because of some of his philanthropic efforts, but I'm telling you, all these guys, Buffett, Marx, Klarman, would love to be him, would love to have his track record. He's so smart.
All right. Can I reach in and transition us?
Please do.
I'm reaching into the fishbowl to talk about fairness. Fairness. This is a life lesson for you, Skippy. I'm bringing this to you. This isn't even for the listeners because you, my friend, need to learn about fairness. The title of this blog post, the problem isn't that life is unfair. It's your broken idea of fairness. This It doesn't really have a lot to do with investing, but it does have to do with psychology, which has to do with investing. So the tie that I'll have into it is those times like in 2020 where we talked about how people looked at their own actions and their stocks gone up and called themselves geniuses. And then in 2021, things kept going up, and then 2022 they went down and they were like, what, this isn't fair. When I put money in, it goes up, but now it's going down. It's because you don't know what fairness is, player. There are 3 rules that are brought up in here that I'll bring up. It's a relatively short post. We'll put it on the Substack, skippydoogles.substack.com on Monday. Check that out. I'll go through them right quick. Rule number 1, life is a competition. I think it should be pretty straightforward, but oftentimes people are told, just do your gosh darndest. Like, that's all that matters. Gee willikers, go do your gosh darndest. And no, it is a competition. Here's a line. I love this little paragraph. That business you work for, someone's trying to kill it. That job you like, someone would love to replace you with a computer program. That girlfriend slash boyfriend slash high paying job slash Nobel Prize that you want, so does somebody else. Fairness. That's rule number 1. Life is a competition. If you got something to chipper, just anytime, come on in here. I'm just going to keep talking.
Yeah, I mean, there's a book out that's ruffled a few feathers called Bad Therapy. Have you read it?
Oh, I have not. No. Worth it?
Okay. Really good book if you have school-age kids. I think it will question how you think about the education system. But some reason that rings true with this book is society has moved to a place of it's pretty soft and cuddly often, and that doesn't change the fact that if you want to win a Nobel Prize, so do thousands of other people. So like you can be all as kind as compassionate as you want, but at the end of the day, yes, if you're after that highly desired prize, whatever it is, so are a bunch of other people. And if you want to actually go win the thing, you got to win that competition.
That's right. That is exactly right. Rule number 2, you're judged by what you do, not what you think. This
but I think such good thoughts.
You do. But then what comes out of your face is not. So it's kind of confusing, whatever the filter mechanism. The 2 graphs that are placed in this section of the blog post, I think, are the simplest way to explain this point. I'm going to describe the graphs. They're easy to describe. So picture a y-axis and an x-axis. On the y-axis, it says reward. On the x-axis, it says quality of thing done. And this is how we think reward works. Quality of thing done, reward. On the left-hand side, it says writing a terrible song. So that's at the bottom. No reward. Yeah. The thing isn't quality. So you think, I wrote a terrible song, therefore didn't get a reward. At the top right, writing the best song ever. So this is how we think reward works, is if you write the best song ever, you should get the best reward. And if you wrote a terrible song, you shouldn't get a reward. Now, how reward actually works. The y-axis, the same, it's reward. But the x-axis is different. It says people impacted. I love this one. So on the left side, it says writing a song that one person hears. It does not matter if it's the best song in the world or a terrible song. If you write a song that one person hears, so no one is impacted, you don't get rewarded. And on the right side, writing a song that 1 billion people hear. It does not matter if that is a terrible song or the best song ever. If you write a song that 1 billion people hear,
song.
You get rewarded. That is the difference between how reward actually works and how people think it works. These graphs are super duper simple, and I love them.
Yeah, this is a clever way for you to do it, Doogles, but this is a great time for us to announce that we're becoming a true crime podcast to get our listener numbers up. You didn't know?
No, are you sending someone over here to do a little something to me? Is this going to be a live true crime situation?
No, this is a bad joke. The amount of people willing to listen to an investing podcast is not as great as the amount of people listening to a true crime podcast. So based on this chart here, hopefully we're producing a quality thing, but that doesn't mean we're going to get 1 billion listeners, is my point.
That is very true. This is one of those situations where you'd say between true crime listeners and investing listeners, you have 1 billion people if you add those 2 things up. And there are 999,999,999 true crime listeners. Okay, rule number 3. Our idea of fairness is self-interest. I'll give a sentence or a couple sentences they have in here to explain this one. You studied hard, but you failed the exam. You worked hard, but you didn't get promoted. You love her, but she won't return your calls. The point is that when people talk about fairness, they just talk about what happens to them. So if I love you and you don't love me, that's unfair. If
Yeah,
I
I love you
worked
too,
hard,
Doogles.
yeah, thank you. See, that's fair. And that's fair. If I studied hard, but I failed, that's not fair. That's the way that people view it. And this is the classic, we got chitlins. This is the way little kids think. If I lost the game, it's not fair. But as you get into adulthood, you should realize that that is not the way the world works, but some folks never do.
Yeah, it'd be tough not to realize that, right? I mean, I, I'm sure we still have our biases. I'm not claiming to be perfect here, but at some point, yeah, you're in that race. You got to win that race,
Yeah,
regardless of your external circumstances.
you have to. And that it's hard to grasp. But when one views their own skill sets, their own experience, I think you view it as unique or powerful or right or it's something like that, and you just don't think about the fact that other people have that same skill, other people thought that same thing, other people tried hard, etc. So those are the three rules. Check out this blog post again. We'll put it on the Substack. I think it's short, it's sweet. Three rules. Life is a competition. You're judged by what you do, not what you think. And our idea of fairness is self-interest. Boom, nailed it. What you got?
I have this frequent rant that I feel like the listeners need to hear.
Oh
You
man,
ready
this is
for
about
this?
capex. This is about capex.
Yeah, of course it's about capex. Okay, basically the Magnificent Seven, but we'll probably start by talking about Google, Microsoft, and Meta have significantly increased their capital expenditures. And this all goes back to the AI race and everyone buying H100s and building out data centers and
Are you gonna
running all
give some
sorts.
background? Are you gonna give background as to why this is important or different?
Well, you give the background. I mean, I'm just going to jump straight to the numbers, but go ahead.
Yeah. So the reason why Skippity Doodah is so bent out of shape about this is because classically, if you go back to the companies of yesteryear, classically, you've got companies that were building big old factories to investing in all kinds of manufacturing. There were a lot of, as he mentioned, capital expenditures where they had to spend money on stuff, plants, property. And then you had these magical companies that came about. We call them technology. We had these
Yeah.
magical companies that came about. They said, we don't need all that down. We don't have to invest in all that stuff. We can use the clouds. We can use the interwebs, right? And if we just use all that, we have much, much higher margins, not as much capital
we're
expenditure.
not we're not building a car, right? So
Exactly.
like we don't have this assembly line that wears out every 30 years. We don't have all this maintenance and utility expense, like all these things where, so basically I think of it as, if you look at your operating free cash flow, it's the efficiency of how much of that you can put in the bank or give to shareholders versus how much of that is just like free money and you're set. Like the business is capital light is what everyone says. And let's go back even before technology. Let's go back to Buffett and Munger and talk about See's Candy.
Yeah.
And the reason they love See's Candy is they found that they had pricing power, so they could raise the cost of a box of chocolates without anyone seeming to care. And they didn't have to take a bunch of money and buy new machines to make chocolate. Like that stuff's cheap anyway, right? So people call chocolate liquid gold for a reason, because it's like, oh my goodness, I just
wait, hold on. You just snuck that in. Is that even true? Who calls chocolate liquid gold?
I
It's
made
not
it
liquid.
up. It sounds good. And actually, I think liquid gold is oil, but thanks for calling me on it. The point being, for the longest time with Microsoft or Google or AWS or Meta, you'd be like, this business is great. Have you looked at the margins? Like they sell software. One of the first things Bill Gates talks about early on when they're still selling CDs is like, once you write the code for Windows, then you have these fixed costs associated with that. But above a certain threshold, like it's all profit. Again, you're not manufacturing a new car each time. You are just sending someone a new CD, or in today's world, sending them a download. It's effectively free to deliver that next.
It's all just
sale.
bits and bytes. All bits and bytes.
Well, then these yahoos all got involved in the AI race, And I'm going to talk a bunch of different numbers here, but they're all directionally the same. The reason they vary
Ironically,
some,
I think you
yeah,
just mentioned the only company that's not involved in AI, Yahoo.
yeah, because they're effectively dead. So first, let's talk about Microsoft, Google, AWS, and Meta, and this is their cloud CapEx spend.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
In like 2020, it was, let me find the right, these are in billions. 2020 is $68 billion. In 2024, it's expected to be $177 billion.
So
In
double.
2025, it's expected to be $195 billion. Here's a slightly different metric related to the same thing. This is CapEx expenditures for, in this case, just Microsoft, Google, and Meta. So again, you go back to 2020, the combined for those three companies was $52 billion. And in 2024, it's going on $152 billion. Call it a 3x increase. All right. So my point is that these companies don't appear to be capital light companies anymore. They're manufacturing AI answers in an incredibly expensive way. One, you buy really expensive chips. Two, you build really expensive data centers. Three, you have to pay the power and the utilities on those data centers. And that cost, certainly right now, doesn't look like it's going down anytime soon. Now, the market cycle will come and this will get cheaper. And Doogles, we've talked about Microsoft is like actively going under contract to buy power plants to power these data centers because they want to be able to control that cost. My point here, and I know you're sick of hearing it because this is the fifth time I've talked to you about it, is just you have to change your investing hypothesis for these companies. It seems logical to me. Let me say it that way.
Yeah.
To change your investing hypothesis to say, this isn't See's Candy anymore. This is like General Motors.
I'm gonna make a little tie here to a different piece that came out because I think your exact language. I'm gonna take your exact language here. You have to change your investing hypothesis on these companies. I think it may not be that you have to change your investment hypothesis on the category of companies, but you may have to specifically on these companies, maybe, because so there was this piece, this Wall Street Journal piece that came out from our boy, James McIntosh. I don't remember the title offhand right now, but it's something like the Dow is a dumb index, but it's telling us something important. It's something like that.
Yeah.
And what he says in this piece, to paraphrase, is that the Dow Jones, well, he says the Dow Jones is dumb. It's 30 stocks and who cares is why it's dumb. But the important part, which I think might relate to this, is what he says that he's claiming happens is by the time the Dow selects an organization to be a part of it, it's a has-been. So the Dow picks companies that are like used to be important, and the S&P 500 picks companies that are currently important. Kind of, it's like something like that is what he throws out there. The reason I bring that up here is because this could be the case where the particular companies, maybe not all of them, but the particular companies you're talking about right now are going to be the ones that do all the investment to figure out how to do the thing. And then the new companies come about and figure out how to do that thing in a capital light way, the same thing once the way is paved. And so these companies could potentially be digging their own financial, not grave, but their own like financial future in that case, which might not be as lucrative as the next wave of companies.
Meta's doing this open source. So
yeah.
Theoretically, it's available. Yes. Like they'll pay the hundreds of billions of dollars in research, and then someone is going to use their technology to make the real breakthroughs. Now, they're playing the hundreds and billions in research to protect their current moat, right? Because they don't want someone to completely break their business model. That's my point with all these. And so one more stat for you. This is about the Magnificent Seven rather than just 3 or 4 cloud providers. But according to Jeff Richards, they are now reinvesting 61% of their operating free cash flow back to CapEx and R&D. They weren't doing that. I don't know the exact stat, but they weren't doing that 10 years ago. Meta literally was just showing up and being like, we have all this profit and we don't know. We have all this free cash flow and we're like, we don't know what to do with it. Which is why Zuckerberg 2 years ago was like, I think I'll spend tens of billions of dollars on the metaverse, and the market revolted because he had tens of $1 billions to spend because he was like, I don't even know. Like my business is so good. So I think that's what's happening. I think they're paying to defend their moats, Google and search, Microsoft and Office and cloud and everything else. And they just became, well, this is too strong. I mean, I want to say like they're transitioning to has-been businesses. I don't know that. I'm just saying if your investment hypothesis said X times operating free cash flow, it has to change because right now on all their conference calls, no one's saying like, we're going to do this for 2 years and be done with it. And we're going to be capital light again. People are saying we're going to do this forever. And we're going to build the next massive AI model and then the next massive AI model. You hear Sam Altman at OpenAI talk about the billions of dollars to spend like it's nothing. You know, the rumors 6 months ago is he wanted to go raise what, how many trillions?
Yeah,
to
something
support
like that. Yeah,
like it seems like the whole AI industry has lost sight because maybe it's a bubble or maybe there's just so much hype around it right now that dollars and cents didn't seem to matter for a brief period of time, and that just concerns me as an investor.
Yeah, it's the promise of what could be. I do agree. I like that you brought this down to answering the question of what was your investment thesis to start off with, and do the numbers still match to that? I think that is critical. If your investment thesis is to the moon, then good for you, double down.
Good for you, double down.
I mean,
if it's not, I think I just think you have to be more cautious of these companies because everyone with a brain was willing to pay a higher multiple for Google 10 years ago than they were for Toyota. And now I'm not sure how different the companies are.
Okay.
I'm being
Now
drastic there, but it's to prove a point.
They don't call AI liquid gold for a reason. Okay. But the only way, here's my transition, next fishbowl item. The only way that you can look at your investment thesis and compare it to the numbers is if you got that financial literacy. You like that?
I like that.
Okay. There's this poll or survey conducted by One Poll on behalf of Beyond Finance, where it polled 2,000 US residents from a whole bunch of age groups and whatnot. We found it at unusualwhales.com. And the survey, I'm going to name 3 to 4 stats that I found of interest that came from it. The first, nearly 43% of participants admitted they're unsure about what a 401k retirement plan entails. So this one's interesting because I think the words were chosen selectively and it's important.
Yeah.
It's what a 401k retirement plan entails. It's not what is it or that it exists. It's just like, what is it really? I think is probably the question there, but I think that one's interesting. This one hit me upside the noggin. 35% admitted they are unfamiliar with the term interest as it relates to personal finance.
I mean, talk about the zero interest rate phenomenon really messing with people's brains here. I've told this story before. As a 6-year-old, I knew what interest was because I had a bank account. Yep. My parents were trying to explain that to me, and my bank account was making 5%. We both raise kids these days in a world where you get 0% or 0.01% on your typical bank account. It doesn't even make sense for your kids to have a bank account because there's no lesson to be taught there.
The lesson is you put the money away and don't think about it, but it doesn't do anything while it's over there.
It's not that different than a shoebox is my point.
Yeah. No,
right.
That's right.
So who should I blame for that? I'm going to blame the Fed for that. Somebody.
Bernanke?
Yeah, there we go.
There you go. Okay. On the other side, there's some psychology in this next one that I couldn't figure out what it was offhand, but maybe we can chitty chat about it. 80% of people, so that's a high number. This one's a high number. 80% of people said they attempt to set a monthly budget. So there's something here for me. Tell me if you think if I'm just barking up the wrong shoelace. There's something here where it seems like the concept of spending money in a controlled manner, the concept, not the actual practice, but the concept of spending money in a controlled manner or trying to do so, people relate very easily to that. Whereas the concept of 401k, the concept of interest, the concept of like compounding, all that stuff is completely foreign. But there's something about money here where people can grasp onto it.
Yeah, but budgets don't work. For like 95% of people, budgets don't work. So
The concept.
I think this is, oh my goodness, I can't say I don't budget. I sound like an idiot if I say I don't budget. So people answer yes. I don't know that this question means anything.
Okay, let me say this in a different way. No, you might be right. I'm trying to explore this for myself. Let me say it in a different way. People know what a budget is.
Okay.
And they don't know what interest is. Like that is there's something about budgeting that can stick with people and is easily like understandable, whereas the other stuff is foreign.
Yeah, I think okay, I follow. But
Yeah.
I kind of think personal finance is about hiding money from yourself and buying assets with it effectively. And the reason I say that is because the long time horizons that we always talk about, and there's like no instant gratification or very little in planning for expenses that are 30 or 40 years out.
Yep.
And the reason I say hiding money from yourself is because if that money is available to you, the large majority of people will spend it because they're terrible at budgeting. So like, ah, man, I'd love for that 80%. I think you're going down the list being like, where are the bright spots? I don't know that that's a bright spot.
Yeah. In general, in life, what I'm trying to figure out is what resonates with people when it comes to money so they can get better at managing it. And so this was one thing where I was like, there's something in the concept of the budget. We don't have to go into more detail here. There's something about the concept of budget that like people seem to get. And is it possible to use that for them to understand the rest? And I don't know what it is, but they just get it. Like they know that budgeting is a thing and they don't know that interest is a thing. They don't know like it. And so there's something about it. That's it. We don't have to go into more detail, but that's the path I'm on.
Gosh, I wish I had a breakthrough for you there. I don't.
I know you don't. All right. What else you got?
Just singing this Howard Marks memo from this week.
No, you didn't. I don't think you did. Maybe, but I didn't read it. I'll tell you that much.
Morgan Housel recommended the Kent. Well, he was throwing out Kent Newberg quotes, which led me to read the Kent Newberg book. And then Morgan wrote a blog post largely on Kent's idea of debt. Well, then Howard Marks picks up Morgan's post and builds on it. Says, I like Morgan's post so much. So I've been, for a month now, I've just been inundated with stuff I really like. Howard's memo is short. It's called The Impact of Debt. And he talks a lot about the Morgan piece, which we've talked about. The thing I love so much is he mentions, they're really not profiles, but mentions 140 businesses in Japan that have been operating for more than 500 years. And he kind of says why.
Yep.
And it largely relates to their extremely conservative nature with debt. No debt, tons of cash on hand. You can ride through a world war, a tsunami, whatever else. Then Howard picks it up, and Howard's brilliant. So he references a previous memo he wrote in 2008 called, let me find the exact name of it, Volatility plus Leverage equals Dynamite. And mentions one of my favorite quotes that is, let me make sure I said this right. It reminds me of an important adage. Never forget of the 6 foot tall person who drowned crossing a stream that is 5 feet deep on average. Right.
Yes.
So Howard's just saying that he goes as far to say that like Morgan's post is so insightful and valuable, but that doesn't mean debt's bad. It just means you have to think about debt very carefully. And whatever debt you're comfortable with is probably too much. You never want to take the most amount of debt that's offered to you. And it kind of depends on what your goal is, right? Is your goal, I don't know, more of a lotto ticket? Is it more of a speculation? Like I'm trying to hit it big, and if I go bust, I'll deal with it. Or is your goal truly, are you building a company that you want to be around for 500 years? Like for very few companies, is that the goal?
And just be honest about it.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. You frame it right, and then you go for it. But so that led me ultimately to this question, Doogles, that I really want your take on. Do you think there's any companies in America today, call them public or well-known companies, that might answer that question? Yes, meaning we want to build a company that's around for 500 plus years.
No, I can
Okay,
say
here's
more.
my thought process. I want you to say more. I went Berkshire, maybe. No, I went like, nope, it's 150 to 200 years is the goal or something. Then I went like any of the big ones, fill in the blank, Microsoft, Apple, JP Morgan, whoever. No, their current leadership would rather have a blowout quarter or decade than they would be around. They'd rather amplify the gains for the near term than they would be around for 500 years.
I might be taking your question too literally. The reason I said no so swiftly is because the concept of 500 years doesn't exist in America. Our country is not even 250 years old. We're going to turn 250 years old pretty soon. And so I think 100 years, I think there are companies that will talk about 100 years because we get it. Japan is so old. China is so old. Like they think about things in millennia. We don't, just as a concept. Like the idea of a decade is like people are like, I have no idea what's going to be going on in 10 years. Like that's hard for America.
Yep.
That's why I said it.
Well, should we reset the time frame on the American scale and maybe say 200 years? You think there's any companies that really desire to be around for 200 years?
I'd say yes. 200 years, yes. And
Okay.
they're the
Who
companies
are
that
they?
have they're the companies that have already been around for over 100 years. I'd say I'd put like insurance companies, a couple insurance companies, the Hartford,
Yeah. Okay. So insurance and banking.
maybe
There's a
Ford.
lot of 150-year-old, 200-year-old banks. But
Ford,
I
maybe.
mean, Ford, okay. The thing about insurance and banking is kind of like you can go bust and
Yeah.
someone else buys your brand.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm not sure that any of those
That's right.
are around. Like I used to work for a bank that had been around for 150 years, but they had plenty of missteps, plenty of excess uses of leverage, and you just almost couldn't kill them because they housed the wealth of a large majority of people in this country. Right?
Maybe Alphabet, but not Google.
I don't think Google has any desire to be around for 200 years.
Alphabet.
you're, you're playing with nuance here. Okay, I'm gonna ask the question in a slightly different way.
Okay.
And you won't be able to name names here, but we'll use a 200-year time horizon. Let's talk about family wealth.
Ooh.
How many families even care? Like I don't think many, the rich dude or rich gal that's leading this family that has an impressive track record. They probably want their kids and their kids to be able to have free education and have a nice life or whatever. But I don't know many families that would even care about 200 years down the line and still having a legacy.
Yeah, that's a hard one. I could see maybe I'd like the Waltons. I could see them wanting to do it. I think there are some. I think there are some.
Well, they should stop buying sports teams then. All right. Anyway, read this memo from Howard because it's just brilliant. And what he said, he's so great at not speaking in absolutes, at saying like the prudent thing to do is this, because the brilliance with him is you can go back and he will reference it. He'll say, I said this 20 years ago. Look at this memo I wrote in 2008. You go back and read the 2008 memo and you're like, gosh, he was exactly right. He's incredible. You can make so much money from Howard Marks.
It's basic concepts explained very well, but hard to live by for people. I agree.
Yeah. So when I read this memo, I was like, you know what? I think Howard's right. Like maybe I should use some debt. And then I like ran the numbers of what I'd be comfortable with. I'd be comfortable with like 1% of my portfolio, which would do nothing to my returns. So
but you could claim it.
Howard got me comfortable with debt, a meaningless amount that would not change my life in any way.
There you go. Yes, exactly right. Before we wrap here, speaking of investment theses, I had one that changed this past week.
Ooh,
and
juicy.
Skippy's going to be pointing his finger at me. I
This
sold
was not in
roughly.
the pre-show meeting.
This was
I
not.
mean,
I sold roughly half of my Twilio stake this week. And so the investment thesis changed. Twilio just had their most recent earnings. I took a look through it. And my investment thesis, as I said before, to me, Twilio was one of those companies that I could see as a forever hold because of the promise that I saw in their underlying technology and what it could do for communication. And at least as of now, that side of my investment thesis kind of went away. I was like, I don't think they're going to do that. And now for me, it's a you won't believe in this word, but it's for my the way I view things, it's a cheap tech company. Is like now what it is. So that's why I held on to it because it is like it's a relatively cheap tech company at this point. And so I can make some money off of it, but it changed from, at least from what they've proven so far, it changed from the forever hold for me. It was a little bit sad.
sorry to hear that. You'll be happy or sad to know that I feel like it's been a dumpster fire recently, and I decided not to confront you about it on the pod because I didn't think that was being a good friend. But I'm happy to hear that you've sold. Let me actually have a stat here. People love to talk about buying companies forever, and they love to talk about that, I think, because Buffett and Munger said that for a while.
Could be.
Since 2010, Buffett has sold his entire holdings in 63 positions with an average hold time of 4 years and 3 months. Here's the point. I think Buffett often makes a purchase thinking that he hopes it can be American Express or Coca-Cola. But even those positions are interesting. Like he doesn't actively really manipulate the Coca-Cola holdings or the American Express holdings, meaning buy more shares. I think oftentimes he just bought something in the 70s or 80s and he goes, gosh, the cost basis on this is great and I don't have anything else to do with the money. So those become forever holds for him. Anyway, to your framing, like it's awesome you were buying a company that you hoped and were optimistic about being able to hold forever. But what the smart people do in life, and I'm obviously using Buffett as an example, is when the facts change, they go, see you later.
No, like exactly.
Just buying the thing and begrudgingly holding it because you think that makes you a good investor when the company turns out to be something you didn't think it was is borderline idiotic. So props to you, Doogles.
I that was really well said. I don't like to give you compliments, but that was very well said. Yeah, the other way probably to say this is for most of the stocks that I buy, I have the sell criteria going in, and this was one that I didn't. Is probably a more accurate way to say it versus forever hold. That I thought it was one that could be ridden for a while, but I do agree with. I think your point was like so well said that when facts change, like check the facts. It's consistent, right? Even when and it's hard to look back at some of these things, I think, objectively all the time. But at least in the cases that I've seen, when investors have talked about holding stocks for a long time, like well-known great investors talk about holding stocks for a long time, the way they talk about it is they do discuss looking at earnings as they go along and saying my investment thesis still holds. It's not a blind holding. So I thought it would do this, that happened.
Yeah. So let me ask you, specific to Twilio and the purchase, if you had to do it all over again, do you wish you would have had a clear like sell criteria in place when you made the purchase?
Not necessarily. No, I'm good without it for this one. What I'm glad that I had was a clear thesis. If I didn't have sell criteria nor thesis, that I would have regretted because then there'd be nothing to check back up against. But at least I could look now and say the thing that I want, one of the two things that I thought would happen happened, and the other one did not. So path to profitability, they're riding that.
Mm-hmm.
Check. Growth of the business has gone to and stayed at like negligible numbers. And so that's the
it's interesting that you still hold half your position because certainly if they flip profitable, I mean, I kind of hate Twilio in all senses of the world because they've been around, refresh my memory, 20 plus years, a long time, right?
More like they've been public for like 6
plus?
years or so. So they're probably around for 10 to 12 years. I can't remember when they were.
The last time I looked, I just was like, they were older than I thought they were, and they still weren't profitable.
Yeah.
But this
they're
is
probably
years
founded in
back,
like 2010, 2011, something like that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, maybe it's good. But anyway, you hold half because
I think it's still a cheap, like relatively cheap stock that like still it if it did something, it's at a price where like if it did anything, then it would still go up. So I started buying in I think like the 70s price wise, and continued buying as it fell. And so now the shares that I hold now, I bought in the 40s, and it's at about 60. So like I think it's a relatively like cheap stock that I think still has some upside, but I'm discounting the large upside that I had considered before.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a base hit rather than a potential
Yeah.
grand slam.
Exactly.
I think when you bought it, you thought it could be a grand slam.
Yeah. Oh, very much so. 600 bagger.
Typical day over here for me. All right. So that's a wrap?
I think that's a wrap. Yeah. I think so.
That's a wrap. We got a new premium subscriber this week, multiple, I think. You can hit premium subscriptions at skippydoogles.supercast.com. There's 2 tiers there. One allows you to get some premium content, get the show a day early on Sundays rather than Mondays, and other good stuff. And then there's one that gives you insights to our stock picks and all the other benefits. So check those out for sure. We love premium subscribers. That helps the show. If you're interested in going to Omaha next year, shoot us an email, skippydoogles@gmail.com, and I will do some digging on killer Airbnbs. We probably need like a pool, a slide.
Oh my goodness.
What do you think?
It was like 50 degrees and rainy.
I need a pool. I'm just telling you.
Fair enough.
And please share the show with a friend. And if you haven't, review it on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.